So somebody had asked me the other day if I was a conservative, and I would say socially I'm a conservative. Politically, no, I would consider myself a Roosevelt-style progressive, more so a Teddy Roosevelt-style progressive than a Franklin Roosevelt-style progressive, but a progressive nonetheless. Um, so I'm going to get into why I quit being a political conservative. I haven't been a political conservative for many, many, many years. I quit being a political conservative when I threw in with Donald Trump in 2016. As many people now, of course, I regretted that, as I've made many videos that were anti-Trump. But in 2016, I threw in with Trump. Trump is clearly not a conservative. He's pro LGBTQIAP. He's pro a lot of things. He's pro letting criminals out of prison. He's pro uh, many things that are very bad for the country. I believe that he sold us out to Israel. I believe he sold us out to Saudi Arabia. I believe that he did not do his damnedest to ensure that the infrastructure was properly cared for during his regime. I believe that he also, what else did he do? I believe that the wall was a waste of resources when that would have been better handled by increasing the amount of border patrol agents on the border. And also implementing mandatory e-verify for businesses and other things that would have dried up opportunities for illegals coming into this country. I don't believe that he did everything he could to freeze all immigration until things were settled in this country. And I don't think he did anything to ensure the Muslim ban that he talked about so much. And I wasn't even for a Muslim ban. What I was for is banning people from countries that, all countries with potential terrorists. Okay, I wanted that. But he really didn't deliver what he said he was going to deliver, and in fact, he delivered the opposite in a lot of cases. All I have to say is the Platinum Plan, the criminal justice reform, and all these crazy, crazy things that he did. So obviously, he delivered very anti-American policies that damaged America irreparably, I think, unfortunately. I don't think we're coming back from this because I don't think Biden can go back to implementing the Biden crime bill after Trump overturned the Biden crime bill. But the Biden crime bill did result in record lows in crime, amazingly record lows in crime. And I'm going to leave a link to my favorite Bill Clinton speech about that. So, what led me to journey away from political conservatism? Well, political conservatism in this country is more or less dead, but also for example, I'm a U.S. nationalist. I believe in what is best for the United States. Liberal policy, conservative policy, progressive policy, indifferent. As long as it's good for the United States, I'm for it. There are a lot of people that like to state that, quote, socialism doesn't work. Now, anybody that looks at fascist Italy or National Socialist Germany or the Soviet Union, and they look at them prior to, you look at Italy prior to fascism, and you look at Germany prior to National Socialism, and you look at the Soviet Union prior to communism, you will notice that after these systems of governance have been implemented, that there has been a very drastic modernization, and the livelihoods of people and the living conditions of people improved immensely under these systems. Okay? If you deny that, you are not being honest. And that's what is the problem I have with these people, is because some people cannot admit that these systems, these socialist systems, because people have merged capitalism with conservatism. And what should be merged with conservatism is fair trade, not free trade. So my point is markets should be regulated because the markets do not regulate themselves. And out of control capitalism, people wonder why so many people are drawn to these off the wall systems of governance anymore, like monarchism and anarchism and communism and national socialism and these things. Well, I can tell you as a former National Socialist, what draws people to these things is the idea that there can be some sort of normalcy reinstituted, some type of thing where we know what the next day will bring. And you don't have that in an out of control capitalist country. It just isn't there. You don't know if you're going to be breathing another breath tomorrow, because the system is a capitalist system does not work. It does not. It is not the best system to ensure that the consumer gets the services and stuff that they need. It's not, and that's very visible through just looking at the differences in many countries. So the thing is, and now I don't like using the Scandinavian countries because the liberal policies they mixed with socialism have caused, the whole countries to be on fire. But the Scandinavian countries are another example of countries that do well under socialism. I would consider myself more or less a socialist. I've actually done a video about what I call techno-communism. And the reason I called it techno-communism is because we have reached a point where we have escaped scarcity. Despite the current situation of false scarcity, there isn't much scarcity. There isn't many jobs that can't be replaced by artificial intelligence. I've done videos about that too. And I think that humanity needs to abandon its scarcity-based mindset and embrace the fact that, the way that we currently live is not necessary. People do not need to be hungry. People do not need to be thirsty. People do not need to be homeless. We don't live in a world where... Now, the thing is, the limitations of communism have been superseded by technology. And then people go, well, that technology came from capitalism. Did it really? No. NASA is not capitalism, okay? A lot of these colleges like MIT are not capitalism, okay? DARPA, the Defense Department's research wing, that is not capitalism. And if you look at the things that have come from these agencies, you have the microwave oven, you have of course the internet, you have telecommunications actually came out obviously by Alexander Graham Bell, but it was enhanced and made better by DARPA and things like that. Many medical advancements are paid for. The research is done. The basic science research is done with public funding, and then these pharmaceutical companies move in and grab credit for the patents. It's just a really nasty situation we have going on with capitalism taking the credit for things that public funding has done. Okay, I would assume for example, the majority of public schools are not as bad as people think, but the thing is, most people go to public schools and they come out just fine. Go back to pre-public school days and look at the education level of the average person. The average person was illiterate, okay? And that's the thing too, is if you look at the way these things work, people can blame socialism for all this LGBTQIAP stuff in school, but that's not socialism. That's special interests. That's what that is. That's special interests. So it's kind of like political capitalism, because these are people that have bought a ticket to say their piece in the public schools. If the public schools operated similar to a communist country, of course, without the ideology, I would recommend removing political ideology, except maybe for a civics class, from the schools. But if you go back to reading, writing, math, science, etc., the basics that you need, you're not going to have any complaints. And that would be a truly conservatively run school based on government standards of what these things are. The reason the government standards are all kooky is, again, capitalism has infected the political climate, and the highest bidder controls specific politicians. That's why this type of corruption is so prevalent and why it controls the social mindset. Now, another thing that got me to go away from conservatism was this thing, the heartbeat bill, and this nonsensical I'm not necessarily anti-abortion. Personally, I don't agree with abortion as birth control, but I've always agreed with abortion in the cases of incest and rape. Okay? So, and also if the child is defective. I have agreed with abortion in those three scenarios: a defective child, rape, or incest. The problem is conservatives have merged their own value systems with the politics. Now, the fact is, I do not see abortion as a legal issue. I do not see it as a political issue. I see it as a medical procedure and a moral breakdown of this society when people are using it as birth control. And that's what's going on. You have a moral and societal breakdown. If people were raising their children right, for example, if I had a daughter and I raised her properly, the first thing number one, she's probably not going to have premarital sex and get knocked up in the first place. Number two, if she does get knocked up, she's going to take responsibility for that child. And number three, if the dude was raised properly, he'd take responsibility for that child. Another thing is you don't see, another sign of societal breakdown is you don't see the degree of carefulness in regards to using things like prophylactics anymore and things of that nature to prevent unwanted pregnancies, and you don't see responsibility with true responsible family planning. I do not believe there should be laws to restrict adult women from having abortions. I don't believe that's the best way to go about it. As I've said in my previous video, people know my views on legalization of drugs. I believe everything should be legal because I believe the war on drugs has done more to damage society by connecting all these crimes to drugs and in turn allowing the drug culture to become a criminal culture. And it has really wrecked society in many ways, similar to how prohibition allowed for organized crime to grow. Of course, the prohibition of what are now illicit substances has caused organized crime to grow. And so much so that it's not even just organized crime, but you got small-time organized crime too, pushing drugs and things of that nature, which would not happen if these drugs were legal, taxed, and regulated by the federal government. And that's why I'm not against that. I'm not against legalization of drugs. As people know, I don't do drugs, but I'm not against the legalization of drugs. So my viewpoints are very diametrically opposed to many conservatives, because many conservatives have, well, number one, they're either Jesus freaks or they're greedy. You can't have it both or both. Sometimes it's both. But it's funny because you have Jesus freaks justifying their greed with the prosperity gospel or things of that nature. But they're not, you don't see too many conservatives. Conservatives are such as this. Okay. If you want women to stop having abortions, unnecessary abortions, maybe you should start funding things that will help them have the food, shelter, and means that they need to take care of the children. Okay? That's very capable. Instead, you see conservatives are always against these things. Okay? Always against them. If you're against abortion, why don't you build more state-funded orphanages? You can't do that for some reason. And they'll complain there's no money for it. There's no money for it. Well, the Afghan war and the Iraq war, which were two very unnecessary wars that we poured oodles of money into, certainly were not, there was no lack of money for them. The money that the trillions of dollars that Trump made materialize out of thin air and gave to the super wealthy in this country, there was no limit on that, which has caused the current inflation problem. All these people that are saying Biden has caused, I'm not a big Biden fan, don't get me wrong. I don't like Biden. I was a Tulsi Gabbard supporter. I'm still a Tulsi Gabbard supporter. I hope she runs as a Republican next time around so I can vote for her. And I will have to switch back, of course, temporarily to being a Republican. But my point is with that is what you need to understand is the current state of inflation is caused by Donald Trump and Donald Trump making money materialize out of thin air. The other thing that you need to understand about the situation, such as the Build Back Better plan, Build Back Better, I'm not 100% in favor of it because sometimes there's a little bit of corruption in these things with the unions and whatnot. But Build Back Better assures that things that are made in this country are used in this country to rebuild U.S. infrastructure, which will create U.S. jobs, which will create more revenue, which will help to do something about the economic crisis and crime, well, not the crime crisis, but it'll help to do something about the economic crisis that was caused by Trump. And then people will go, well, this is all Biden's fault. People forget we had three really bad presidents before Biden. We had Bush, we had Obama, and we had Trump. All three of these people played games with our economy that have completely destroyed us economically. You only see things now being done to actually revive us economically. Under Bush, there were some small things like I think it was called the Economic Empowerment Act, but that was overshadowed by the hemorrhaging of money into Afghanistan and Iraq, which was completely unnecessary. And that's another thing that you see. Another thing about conservatism that got me to go away from conservatism is the nonsensical support of Israel for no reason. There's no reason, like, okay. Right now, I'm not in support of Ukraine, and I'm not in support of Russia. I support neither of them, okay? However, I do think that Russia is a danger to the world as, well, the leader of Russia has threatened the world with nuclear annihilation, I don't know how many times, okay? So yes, I believe Russia is basically a danger to the world, and I believe a war with the Ukraine is better than a war with the United States, and like a war between Russia and the Ukraine is better than a war between the United States and Russia. That's my opinion. So I'm not against, that's just my opinion, and I think that's what's going on now. However, the idea that giving this money to Ukraine is somehow some magical bad juju or something is completely idiotic when we give billions to Israel. Okay? And what's the difference? Well, one's Israel and one is an Eastern European country. That's about it. You don't hear the liberals and the conservatives up in arms about that, do you? And the thing is, a lot of people, like, I thought it was funny, people are complaining, like I said, people whine that we're giving them our out-of-date military equipment. Yeah, that's so we can replenish our stocks with newer generation weapons that will be better. That's what that's about. People that aren't following the public funding of things like DARPA. DARPA has done so much to advance humanity, it's ridiculous. The internet comes from DARPA, from ARPANET. Okay? The thing is, people are not understanding these things. For whatever reason, they're either choosing not to understand them or they're just blatantly not understanding them. My view on conservatism is that conservatism is a U.S.-style conservatism is a very poor system to govern the country at large, particularly. Okay, from the federal government on downward. The idea of free trade instead of fair trade, the idea of unrestrained capitalism, the idea of a war on drugs that is not going to be won, the idea of this new brew of conservatism, this idea of a platinum plan and building Chinese communist style special economic zones for the benefit of one group of people at the expense of all other groups of people in the country. It's unacceptable, especially when we have the technology of abundance. We can desalinate water, we can use vertical farming, we can do 3D printing. There are many things that we can do in order to bring about prosperity in this country. But the thing is, it can't be done under a capitalist system because it doesn't cost much. It's not causing the rich to get richer. And that's one of the things. When I studied Juan Perón, one of the things that I noticed about Juan Perón was it doesn't seem like he was deposed necessarily because the poor were doing better. Well, I'm sorry, because the rich were doing worse, because the rich weren't doing worse under Perón. The rich were doing the same as the rich do. Similar to National Socialist Germany, the rich did fine in National Socialist Germany. But the poor did much better in Argentina under Juan Perón, which meant that some people did not like that very much. They did not like that the poor were doing better under Juan Perón, because the way that a lot of rich people view things is, what's the point of being rich if the poor are well off also? Not understanding And I've said this before, the best way to judge the quality of a country is not by how well the rich are doing, not by how well the rich can access medicine, not by how well the rich can access food, not by how well the rich can access housing, not by how well the rich can access a vehicle, not by how well the rich are making money and basically participating in the economy, but by how well the poor do these things. And that's the thing, that you judge the wealth of a nation not by its richest, but by its poorest, because there's always more poor than there are rich. But how are the poor living? Are the poor dying in mass? Are the poor starving? Are the poor having, and these are things that are going to be happening in the United States and have been happening. When I was homeless, nobody would believe that there were so many homeless in my area. You wouldn't believe it. And a lot of the homeless that were around, you have people that are homeless now, and back when I was homeless in 2008, okay, that were homeless. You have welders, you have construction workers, you have college level graduates that are homeless because they can't find work, or because the union, different issues with unions and things of that nature. And this is why you need more government standards on employers and things like that. If you look at how the school boards are run in my local area, they always complain they don't have enough money for books, they don't have enough money for this, they don't have enough money for that, but yet the superintendent is making a six-figure salary for what? And that's the thing, and the teachers don't get paid well. Well, maybe instead of asking for more money from the state and federal government, maybe there should be a cap on what the superintendent makes, and that money, that residual money, not just the superintendent, but the other executive staff and whatnot, and that should be capped, and perhaps that money should trickle down to the teachers and for other purposes for the school. Doesn't take a genius to figure out how to do these things. But what it does take is it takes a progressive and not a conservative. And that's the problem with conservatism, is conservatism sees one thing: greedy poor people. That's all conservatives see, is greedy poor people. Well, the problems are not the greedy poor people. The problems are, and have been for a long time, the greedy rich people. It's actually interesting because the progressive movement was started by the wealthy, and it actually fixed a lot of the problems caused by the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age actually gave birth to the progressive movement with people like Rockefeller, Roosevelt, trying to think of the other folks, Firestone, these various, the Bush family, for example, although I don't know what they've really done charitably wise. But you had the Gilded Age give birth to this new age, this progressive age, where the environment, the worker, the average person was championed, and the well-being of the average person was championed by those in power. I think the Gilded Age gave birth to a very wonderful thing with the progressive movement. And then you see other people mimicking that in other countries, such as Germany under National Socialism, Italy under fascism, and essentially communism kind of was more or less although communism proper came out prior, but Soviet communism I do see as a very aggressive and very conservative form of progressivism. And that's all for this video.